Heading now to New London for a live report. Governor Scott Walker has just toured the damage in New London, and he is ready to give a news conference. Let's listen in.
Giving us a tour. Certainly our hearts and prayers go out to you and to all the members of your church and to your family and extended family here, as to people all throughout not only New London. We just came through Hortonville on the way, people in WLUK County, in Outagamie County, people throughout this area. I'm joined by the county board chair from our present county, as well as the county executive and the county board chair from our adjoining county. We've got the mayor here. We've got local officials from the police and fire departments. I'm also joined traveling today by Major General Don Dunbar, the Adjutant General of the Wisconsin National Guard, and Brian Satula, who is the administrator for the Wisconsin Emergency Management. They are joined as well. We are immediately greeted by the emergency management leaders from both Waupaca and Outagamie counties, and they've just been doing a tremendous job. So first and foremost, I want to thank all the folks from local government at the town, county, municipal levels here and throughout the region, because the updates I got even yesterday coming out of the State Fair were tremendous work being done by emergency management, by our first responders, by local law enforcement, by the fire service, rescue squad. Thankfully, in this case, unlike others we've heard about here and around the country, we did not have a loss of life. We had some injuries, but they don't appear to be certainly not life-threatening and extremely serious. For that, we thank God to begin with, because as frustrating as it can be to have to look at destruction like this and think about rebuilding it, you can rebuild the structure.
That's right.
You can't bring back a life, at least on this earth, and so we're thankful for that. But we know first and foremost, I wanted to be here not just to talk about what the government can do in partnership, but first and foremost to the church members here, to the homeowners, to the others we saw in Hortonville. I said it was like a weed whacker came through and trimmed all the beautiful trees that formed the archway there, and along the way saw a horse farm where you could see all the hay from the roof being taken off and the sides off, and just a whole lot of damage scattered all over the place. We got the reports from emergency management early on about the level of the winds coming through, certainly in this area, from 100 to 110 miles per hour at some points at peak, and then going across towards Appleton and up towards Wrightstown and Freedom in that area. Certainly also appreciate, I mentioned, thanks to first responders. I know the American Red Cross has a shelter set up here, as well as in Appleton and Wrightstown. We appreciate their help and all the other volunteers coming in. As I understand it, that's probably being used more right at this point for people seeking to recharge batteries on cell phones and things of that nature, which, as we all become increasingly dependent on, is incredibly important, and we'll be mindful of that. From the state standpoint, we're going to be continued, not just my presence here, but Brian Satula and his team through emergency management will be actively engaged with, particularly through our points in the county emergency management directors, and then working as well with each of the local municipalities to make sure that we can provide the greatest amount of assistance possible. One of the things we're immediately working on, and County Executive Nelson had brought this up right when we arrived, greeted us at the airport, about seeing what additional means we can do to help with debris removal. We understand, just having heard about it, but now physically coming through, seeing the level of debris. Obviously, a lot of folks, the mayor was right in pointing out there are probably as many chainsaws as firearms as there are in this community right now. But one of the great prides I take, and I see it again here when I go out to disaster sites in this state, is to see how many people come out of the woodwork, how many neighbors, and sometimes folks that aren't even just neighbors that come from a far distance to come out and help. So a lot of folks that are out with chainsaws and helping debris removal, and I know you've had that with the church members here. And we just really want to tell you how proud it makes me to be here in Wisconsin when I see that kind of volunteerism, people willing to step up, take some time off from work in many cases, and come on out and help their fellow neighbors, particularly in their situation, if they've been blessed not to have damage in their own home, their own farms, their own property, but to help others out in that regard. And so we're going to continue to monitor that, but I think particularly we're going to look for ways to help on speeding up debris removal. We've also engaged through yesterday Office of the Insurance Commissioner to make sure that claims adjusters are here. I know we've heard from a number who've had adjusters out already in the past day. We want to make sure that for those who have adequate coverage, that's great. That takes and relieves some of the resources that would otherwise have to come from other sources. But we want to make sure that those companies are coming out in a timely fashion, getting to work right away. And it sounds like from what we've heard thus far that they've been doing just that. Here at the church, the neighbors, I think, had them just in, and others. But we want to be on top of that. So for those in local government, if in addition to hearing from the public, if we hear from folks, if you can pass on to us, if there are problems, we'll help through the insurance commissioner's office. And but really our point's going to be through emergency management. More than anything, we're just thought it was important to be here today to show our support, and that we'll do the follow through as we sort things out over the next couple of days. With that, I'll take questions if you got them. For me or for any, if you got questions for anybody else, I won't turn away from you on purpose, but I'll turn to them since I'm the human mic stand, I guess, today. But
Governor Walker, Patrick Nelson with WBAY in Green Bay. What type of assistance are you hoping to get moving forward for the folks that have had this type of damage that you see here behind you?
Yeah, what we do in situations like this, emergency management at the state level has a great formula we go through. You know, sometimes people talk about FEMA and other things. There's a whole threshold that we have to follow by law as to what that is. But one of the first things we do is we want to help municipalities clear right-of-ways for safe access for people for transportation. And you can imagine, I saw on the way over a number of crews out clearing out power lines, because one of the most important things, and a number of us talked about, We Energies in particular, talking about hoping to have by the end of the day tomorrow the vast majority of people up and with power. Wapaka County, you've got We Energies, but you've got a number of other providers that touch the edges. But our hope is first and foremost to help with right-of-way clearance, to help with the utilities, to make sure power's up, because that's vitally important, not only for living conditions, but obviously for hospitals, for nursing homes, for others that are operating off of generators right now. They can do that as part of their emergency plan, but they're much better off if that's taken care of quite quickly. So that's priority number one, is it fits into public safety, it fits into getting people back into livable conditions for those that don't have extreme damage. The other part, as I mentioned, is making sure that we're assisting and ensuring that for those who have insurance, which I would imagine in this case, similar to previous cases, tends to be the vast majority of people, churches, companies, and others out there, that we make sure insurance adjusters are in at a rapid pace to make sure the turnaround gets going right off the bat. Particularly at the local level for extreme needs, we have, and we've increased the funding for the Wisconsin Disaster Fund to particularly help public entities. They're going to need it here in terms of assistance for debris removal, assistance through the Department of Transportation we can provide, and certainly on an individual basis, we'll be looking at that using the criteria we get from the federal government, from FEMA as well. So, but really it's getting people safe, getting power back, and then making sure that most people in this community, like others, have insurance, and helping make sure that insurance comes in, the adjusters are on the spot. And again, increasingly, we've already heard a number of stories today that affirms that.
And from what you've seen, is there a sense of urgency to try to bring that assistance?
Oh, absolutely. You want to get people back. Obviously, something like this is going to take some time, and when you have a structure this big, but you know, for homes like the neighbors over here and others, the sooner you get people back, even if the whole thing isn't completed, but what you want to do is as quickly as possible get people to where they can inhabit their own homes and not have to be staying at a hotel or with friends or others out there. The sooner you can get people back to that, the better. Obviously, some of the other things will take some time, but we try and do it in that order to make sure that first and foremost, public safety, taking care of health and safety needs, and then getting people back in their homes.
Mr. Nelson declared a state of emergency in Allegheny County. Are you going as far to do that as well?
We'll go through. We've got a whole process we do, and part of that is at the local level. They're doing that, sets off the wheels. But we've got a process through emergency management, not only for me to physically be here, but with our administrator working with both Allegheny and Wapaka County's emergency management directors. Their staff helps us collect the data we need for that. We just did this recently, and sometimes it doesn't happen automatically. We just did this last week. We did a declaration related to the flooding that we had in a number of rural parts of the state. where we got a declaration, and that teed up some resources from the federal government through USDA. So again, we've got a whole criteria we'll walk through, and part of it is not only me being here, but our team being here physically.
So that will play a role in deciding what kind of funding they get, or?
Well, part of it with the local entity making that declaration, that helps us in terms of that's the initial waiver request, and then we'll go through and look at the thresholds the state has, and obviously, and I have no idea without looking at the numbers, it's still pretty early as to whether or not that ties into a federal, but that's a pretty high standard. Usually at the state level, we can help, and particularly help with the public entities that will have significant costs when it comes to removal of debris, particularly of the trees that are here, as well as some of the dumpsters you see of debris that's been blown around.
For communities that want to, try to push the process forward, and you look at what has to happen, it really helps out people at the state level to get a communication like a declaration of emergency. And then that allows us to work with the underlying municipalities to put pen to paper, to start tabulating the expenses, the cost, the damage, and so forth. And over a process, we can work with the governor's office, the adjutant general, and see if we can reach that threshold. And then also near term too, since like the big, the big thing we want to do is to try to clean up this mess, get the debris out there, see what kind of resources are available in the way of, perhaps the National Guard, equipment, personnel, just to move this stuff out, so our communities can get back on their feet and get back to an ordinary, beautiful August, summer in Wisconsin.
One of the other things in that regard too, and it fits in with what the county executive said, is it's helpful. I know it's tough with electricity. Some people may not have phones that are charged. It's where a lot of us these days have our cameras from. But it's helpful for folks who are cleaning up, if they take some pictures. The more documentation they have, pass that on. Not only keep that for your insurance adjuster if you've got that, that's all very helpful, but also for all the local officials here, you pass it on to your municipal government, your county government. Those are all things that help in the collection of that data, because again, there are certain thresholds built in, and they're both personal property, but also they're also helpful in terms of, even if it's not your home, but say if there's a bunch of downed trees out in the front of a farm or front of a house, and the city or the town or the county is helping out remove that debris, taking pictures of that, all the more documentation we have, the easier it is to move resources around based on documentation.
Governor, you talked about the brush removal and the state helping. Do you foresee the National Guard playing any sort of role in that?
It's something we're looking at. County Executive Nelson brought that up this morning. Just as we came in, we're on the phone trying to figure out if that's an option, if we can bring other contractors in. There's a variety of different options. We did something like that 2 years ago with, we had about 133,000 acres of wind blow up in the Northwest. And eventually that was one of the options. We brought the 724 Engineering Division in, and that was real helpful for right-of-ways and power lines and things of that nature. That would be one option. There's a bit of time that takes with a deployment in that regard for a unit like that. That might be an option. Some others bring in some equipment from other state agencies in addition to the National Guard. Might be another option if part of it's just physically getting equipment here. There are things we can do that help in that regard as well. But it's helpful to see it. I mean, I get the updates. I get them continuously. I even got them last night during the auction, with helping out the young people at the fair, and get updates frequently in terms of any changes in that. But it's important to be here physically to see it. It helps reinforce that, and then, like I said, to convey, I should say, our prayers for everybody affected by this. Again, while you don't have serious injury and certainly, thankfully, not death, there's a lot of emotion that goes on with something like this, not only at a home, but obviously here, a lot of memories. You think of church members who've lost loved ones and had services here. You think of weddings, you think of baptisms, you think of things like that, as well as memories in homes and other places out there. And there's a lot of emotional trauma that goes through with that. And so this is important. It's part of where another thing the Department of Health Services does. The state will reach out to public health departments here because it's important for people, with the stress of going through this, even without those serious injuries, it's still important to look out for neighbors and the stress they're going through emotionally, as well as any physical distress with the cleanup.
Governor, if you can scale something like this, where does this fall in terms of natural disasters in Wisconsin, really, in terms of damage and what you've seen?
Well, again, I go back to loss of life and injury obviously is extremely important because we've had that in other cases in the state over the years. The other thing you look at is it's significant. To me, a disaster is an extreme disaster if it's your home, it's your property, if it's your church. And so I don't ever put a measurement on that one way or the other. The positive thing, if there is a positive out of this, is not only because of not having serious loss of life, but having it be scattered. Sometimes when you have, for example, massive floods, you may have a whole community where it's almost entirely uninhabitable. Well, that makes it hard for people to adjust. If you have scattered sites, sometimes that's easier for neighbors to help out with in the short term, and certainly that's a positive. But again, if it's your farm, if it's your house. I was just talking with Dave Hutchinson, who served with me in the legislature years ago. His family's had that farm for more than a century, just south of town here. They lost their entire barn. That's one of those where it's, sure, they can replace the barn, but when you've had a farm for more than a century, I just honored 2 days ago all the different farms from around the state this year who reached the century mark and who reached the 150-year mark, and the pride that they had. And so many of them talked about how they've renovated and kept intact their barn and some of their other assets on the property. Well, for somebody like Dave or others like him, he can replace it, but that was just such a rich part of their family's tradition. Those things like that are pretty tough to deal with. So it's hard to put a toll on the emotional impact that can have as well. But certainly the good thing about Wisconsin is we come out, we help our neighbors, we hang tough. We're like the phoenix, we rise again, and we're going to do that just here as well. And what I got a kick out of Pastor you pointing out to me is it's probably a good symbol for the folks in this community, but he pointed out to me when I stood right there that the cross on the window's intact. You could turn and look and see the cross right there intact, and around the corner of the cross was intact there. So I think that was probably a good sign, not only for your members, but for the community, that even out of disaster, there's still hope.
That is right.
Yeah.
God is with us, and those symbols remind us of that and keep us focused on who we are.
Absolutely. Thanks for letting us come by.
My pleasure. Glad you were able to come. Thank you for your presence with us.
It's my honor. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Now I'll come and make sure. I probably have more power on me than we've had here in town for the last day and a half, right?